they always sing.
Howdy, buckaroos, and welcome back to the Wild West Digest for the final time for 2026. Yes, sadly, June on the Range has come and ridden off into the sunset. It went by so freaking fast, didn't it? I don't know if it's just because I'm getting old. I am old. Who am I kidding? I don't know if it's just because I am old that time seems to go by so fast, or if it's something else, but it might even be just because I've been so incredibly busy for the month. But June on the Range is done, dusted, over, but there were a couple things I wanted to touch base on before we wrapped it all up completely and rolled into Rocket Summer, which is coming up very, very soon. So keep an eye out for my Rocket Summer videos. They're going to be fun. They're going to be fun. So June on the Range, I had originally promised, I always put that in quotes. I had a tentative TBR, as you may have seen, that unfortunately I did not get through. In fact, I actually had one book that I DNF'd, and sadly, I just, there were, for reasons. I won't go into it at this point, but there were reasons. But the problem is that I devoted a couple of days to actually trying to get into it, and it just did not work for me. So that one went bye-bye. I mean, it's back on the shelf. It's not like I chucked it in the trash or anything like that. But I did have one DNF, and that was unfortunate. But I got through, what, 3 books, I think, in the month. I'm actually about finished with Shalako. I did not plan on reading any Louis L'Amour for the month, but after I visited his grave, I got a little inspired and I picked this up, really, really nice condition copy of this from the Iliad Bookshop for like $1.50. And I thought, hey, you know what, let's just go ahead and at least get that one prompt done and dusted and read. So I'm enjoying that. I know there's a movie. I think Sean Connery's in it. I'll have to check that out at some point, but a fun book all the same. So the main reason, though, I wanted to do this video is because at the very beginning of June on the Range, I had promised I was going to do a video about tabletop role-playing games set in the West, the American West, the Old West, the Wild West,
the Weird West.
And I was not going to let the sun set on June on the Range without at least coming on camera and going through sort of the history of tabletop role-playing games, or Western tabletop role-playing games, and because I promised, and I have to deliver. I have to deliver on that promise. So what I'm going to do is I want to do more of an off-the-cuff discussion about tabletop role-playing games set in the American West. Oh, and of course, if you're not into TTRPGs, tabletop role-playing games, feel free to swipe. This is I know, for a pretty specific niche of my viewership. So if it's not your thing, that's fine. No hard feelings. But if you're curious, stay tuned. You may learn something. So let's start from the very beginning with what, as far as we know, was the very first role-playing game set in the American West, and that would have been Boot Hill. You'll have to forgive me. I have notes on this side of the screen. I have notes on that side of the screen, and I'm going to have to consult them at some point. So, but I'm not going to read an essay or anything like that. They're just notes. So Boot Hill. Boot Hill starts out as a tabletop miniatures skirmish game. So you can have gunfights on your tabletop using minis or pawns and rolling some dice. So the initial Boot Hill from TSR Hobbies, or I think it was Tactical Studies Rules at that point, was a miniatures game. But then they decided to turn Boot Hill into a full role-playing game, which it did become, and I believe the initial edition was a small little booklet, and then that was expanded into a box set. Now, the box set had dice in it, and it had a rule book and all this other kind of stuff. And as maps, counters, all sorts of things packed into that box. And it did pretty well. I mean, they released that alongside Dungeons & Dragons box sets and alongside Gamma World, which was their post-apocalypse game. So Boot Hill did fine. It stuck around and people were playing it. I distinctly remember seeing it on the shelf at my local bookshop when I was a kid, or game shop rather. And I know people were playing it occasionally at local game conventions. So it stuck around, and then in 1990, TSR, which still was in existence, released a 3rd edition, and I think that one was a single book. I don't own Boot Hill, sadly. Someday, maybe I'll add it to my collection. But they released a 3rd edition in 1990, and that one kind of just came and sputtered out, and that was effectively the end of Boot Hill. from TSR. 1981, though, we're going to pop back in time a little bit. There was a game company called Fantasy Games Unlimited, and they were an interesting company because they did hire some good, talented designers and artists and other people at the time, but most of the stuff they released was sort of on the coattails of other publishers. So TSR, West End Games, who else was publishing back then? There were a few publishers. But so Fantasy Games Unlimited, they did, I believe they did, Villains and Vigilantes, which is still kicking in one form or another. They did Daredevils, which was a pulp game. They did Psyworld, which was sort of a not post-apocalypse, dystopian, where people had psionic powers. They did, what else did they do? They did a whole slew of different genres. One of my biggest criticisms with their games today is that the font they used was like 8-point font. It's so tiny, but the products are pretty good. And they did box sets, and they also did a Western one. They did a game of with a very creative title of Wild West, and I think they did one adventure for that, but that was it. And then that kind of just went poof away again. So not a game that I own, but again, another one I'd love to pick up at some point and add to my collection. I've seen them pop up on eBay every once in a while for pretty low amounts of money. So I think there's even some listed right now for like $20 in the original shrink. So probably after I'm done with this video, I'll go place an order. But so that was Wild West, which would have been 1981. As I scroll down this list, I will tell you that I'm not really going to. There were other companies, foreign companies, that were publishing Wild West games back in the day. There was Swedish ones, Italian ones, Spanish ones. I'm not really going to touch on those so much as the ones that here in the United States or England or other English-speaking countries we would have seen and or played. So those are the ones I'll focus on. I mean, that's, I don't know. That's otherwise I'd be talking for hours, because honestly, if you go to rpggeek.com, I think it's rpggeek.com. It's sort of this repository of all data about role-playing games. And you look up like American history or American West as keywords, you're going to find 130 plus pages of role-playing games and supplements and expansions and modules and all this other stuff that have been released over the years. So there is a glut of this material out there. So if I were to go and talk about all the foreign language editions, this would be a 6-hour video. So we'll jump ahead a little bit. All right, let's see. I'm going to scroll down. Okay. So then 1991, this is a big year for Wild West RPGs. We see Outlaw come out, and Outlaw is published by Iron Crown Enterprises for use with like Rolemaster and Space Master, if those names ring any bells. It was sort of their in-house system, very table heavy. They had crit fail tables that are notorious, so critical fail tables. Not something I really ever looked at. I know one of my best friends had Space Master when I was a kid, and he used to pull some stuff out of that for other games we played, but it wasn't anything I looked at. I've never actually seen a copy of Outlaw in person. I've only seen it online. So Outlaw comes out from Iron Crown Enterprises 1991, and shockingly also in that same year, weirdly, we get Western Hero, which is for use with the Hero system, the same system that was used in the Champions superhero role-playing game. So Western Hero comes out as a supplement for use with that. Interestingly, one of the designers, or I think the main designer of Western Hero, goes on to work on another RPG that I'm going to discuss in a bit at great length. So stick around. I will try to remember to mention him. So Western Hero, again, Iron Crown, but also Hero Games. And that is, as I said, a supplement for use with their Hero system or even with the Champions core mechanics. So that's Outlaw, Western Hero. Also in 1991, GURPS, which stands for the Generic Universal Role-Playing System. I believe that's correct. GURPS releases their own Old West source book so that you can just literally all the GURPS. There were tons and tons of GURPS source books. They're really, really cool books, all black and white, but you can just, sort of plug and play. It basically gave you all the specific rules for using the Old West as your setting, using the GURPS core rule system. And you're going to see there's another system that does, another Western role-playing game that does exactly that kind of thing, but using another in-house system. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So that's obviously a thing that's been around for a while. Let's see. We jump ahead from 1991 to 1996, which is a very, very big year. for Western role-playing games, because that is the year that Deadlands is released. And you'll notice I smile when I say Deadlands, because Deadlands not only is my very favorite role-playing game and game setting, it's also one for which I've actually written material for and run adventures for. And heck, I actually was playing Deadlands just last night with my face-to-face local group. So Deadlands is a very, very important game to me. Deadlands is a game set in the Weird West. And the original books that were published back then and went on for many, many years, all had this bright, bold, orange-yellow background. So the spines were orange, the backgrounds on the cover art were orange and back art. So you could spot these things from a mile away. And they did a whole slew of supplemental material for Deadlands starting in 1996, source books and things like that, box sets. And then that kind of went to the wayside. And then for the 20th anniversary, which would have been 2016, they re-released a special edition, anniversary edition of the game, which looked like this. And this has the original one. I popped the art up there. You can see it had a cover by Brom, which in many ways inspired the game originally. It was actually Shane Hensley who created Deadlands and still runs Pinnacle Entertainment Group, the publisher. He was inspired more or less by that image that you saw on the cover of the orange-covered Deadlands, the original 1996 first edition Deadlands. But for this edition, we had a different artist. I say we. I work for Pinnacle now. This is Aaron Riley. He did a really, really terrific cover. This is a very chonky book that compiles a lot of information that had been published in it for that first and later editions. This is a full-color book, and really, really nice, sexy. But if you were a fan of the original system, which was kind of a fists of dice system, you'd roll 2, 3, 4 or more individual dice to try to get your successes. This was the game for you. But not long after, Shane with Pinnacle Entertainment Group designed a game called Savage Worlds, or a core system called Savage Worlds, which was based on a miniatures game called The Great Rail Wars. And Savage Worlds became their in-house system, and there are loads of settings that use Savage Worlds as its core mechanic system, its base system. And so when they did that, they did updates of Deadlands. Here's the two books from Marshall's Handbook and the Player's Guide. Apologies for the glare on those. But these use the Savage Worlds system at their core. And then they updated that. I think this actually might have been the previous. Yeah, this is Savage Worlds. It's Deadlands Reloaded. But it was back before that Savage Worlds logo existed. So this is kind of that's not going to ever show up. Yeah, you'll see it's bright there. But that was the old logo. And it has continued to go, continued to survive. Deadlands is still going strong. They just had a Kickstarter a few months ago for a new printing, 2026 printing, that combines the Savage Worlds rules with all the Deadlands rules in a single volume. This is the most recent printed edition of Deadlands, which looks like that. There have been numerous source books and adventures and campaigns. This is Blood Drive. This is Hell on the High Plains, which is a source book and adventure compilation for the High Plains. They've done map sets. They've done, as I reach, box sets like this one that contain like your GM screen, your core rule book, cards, pawns, all sorts of other stuff like that. So you could get a big box and kind of dive right in. So Deadlands is, as I said, going very, very strong, still supported. In fact, there's actually another Kickstarter about to launch from Pinnacle for The Mysterious Maze, which basically is California's coast. A little side story, so to speak. In the Deadlands universe, there are all sorts of things that change the frontier. But one of those things is essentially this enormous quake that shatters the California coast and turns it into what they call the Great Maze, and it exposes veins of a new resource called ghost rock, and it burns hotter than coal. But the problem is when you burn it, it screams, and you can occasionally see the faces of the damned in the smoke that comes out of it. So really cool stuff. I mean, Deadlands features obviously monsters, magic, weird science. You can play blessed characters who get their power from the Lord, and yeah, just crazy weapons and all sorts of stuff. You can cast spells. I adore it. It's my absolute favorite setting. And if you're purely for fiction readers, they have done some Deadlands novels. They did, I think, 3 Deadlands novels that came out, and like Jonathan Mayberry wrote one of them. But they also compiled this book, which is called Wendigo Tales, and this is just Deadlands short stories. And these were all stories that were originally featured in these little adventures they published years ago called dime novels. And I'm sure some of you who are in Westerns have heard of dime novels. The dime novels looked like this. Here's a little selection of dime novels, and each one of these would have an adventure, but also a short story that basically told the story of the contents of the dime novel. Well, they pulled all the fiction out and put it into that hardcover book. So if you just want to read some of the Deadlands fiction, there are, as I say, 3 novels. They did some short story compilations as well. I don't have the books nearby, but they did 3 of those. And then, of course, this Wendigo Tales was the most recent compilation of Deadlands fiction. So that is Deadlands, right? Let me move those books aside. All right. So let's see, we'll move to some other stuff. The following year, 1997, we get Werewolf the Wild West. And if you're familiar at all with the World of Darkness from White Wolf Game Studios, the World of Darkness introduced like Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Ascension, Werewolf the Apocalypse, oh gosh, Changeling. There were a whole slew of different settings like that. Tons and tons of support for that. Loads and loads of books and things. There was even a live action role-playing thing that would use all of those settings. But the Werewolf the Wild West took their werewolf setting or rules and dropped it back into the Wild West. And amusingly, there were Werewolf the Wild West Deadlands crossover dime novels that were published back in the day, and I don't have those, but that was kind of an interesting thing. It's all one big incestuous family, the tabletop role-playing game thing. Let's see, what else have we got here? Well, then, and I'm jumping ahead. We've got from 2008, so we're jumping quite a ways. There was a game called Aces and Eights, which was published by Kenzer & Co. And there was a whole bunch of books for Aces and Eights. It's quite a complicated game. I think this book was the skirmish rules, and then they sort of started to move into the RPG territory. And then they did an absolutely gorgeous core book, which looked like an embossed red leather hardcover volume. This is the player's guidebook for Aces and Eights. So it covers a lot of the material exclusively for the players. Aces and Eights is an extraordinarily complicated game. Well, I say extraordinary. I mean, obviously people enjoyed it, but it wasn't really for me. I like my stuff a little bit more fast, furious, and fun, which just happens to be the phrase that's used for Savage Worlds. Fast, furious, fun. But I'll show you one of the things about Aces and Eights that's kind of crazy. So on your character sheet, you would have this will just, yeah, it's right there. It's just on this page. You'd have an outline of a cowboy, and when you were in combat, hopefully this shows up for you. You had this like shot clock that you would put over the guy to determine the damage you did, where the wound or the injury was, how far the bullet strayed, and all this kind of stuff. And there was, you can see there's card symbols there. So fairly complicated system. Not really my cup of tea, but really, really beautiful components. But Aces and Eights, another one, the Shattered Frontiers, I think was the subtitle. 2015, going back to Savage Worlds and Deadlands and things like that, there was a comic published by Oni Press, not in 2015. It was still being published in 2015, but there was a comic series called The Sixth Gun. And it was written by a guy named Cullen Bunn, who's continuing to write comics. He's written for everybody, Marvel and I think DC. He's written for a whole host of comics. And he and Brian Hurt, the main artist, created a comic called The Sixth Gun, which was weird Western, although if you talk to Cullen, he would say it was Western fantasy. It's weird Western. But anyway, there was a six-gun role-playing game, and this is the hardcover. And this was written by, me. So yes, I was brought on to write this game, and I did this and a large adventure that came with the GM screen, and some other supplemental books, materials. We did a companion. You can see it's full color. As I bump my microphone, full color game. It features art by the Brian Hurt, the artist, and that was 2015. More Western stuff. And yes, we did do an adventure called Fractured Frontiers, which had a slight Deadlands crossover. And so, yep, Deadlands permeates the entire scene. And then it just kind of explodes after that. We get like Down Darker Trails for Call of Cthulhu, which was released in 2017. Weird Frontiers, which was published, I can't remember the name of the publisher, but it was published in tandem with Goodman Games, and it's based on the Dungeon Crawl Classics system. So it's a huge, huge book. That was published in 2020. There's Far West, Cowpunchers, Guns of Santa Terina. A lot of these titles I don't even know, but I'm listing them more to show that the Western genre in tabletop role-playing games has not slowed down at all. 2024, we get Huckleberry. 2025, Tales of the Old West, and that's for the Year Zero engine, if anybody's familiar with that. Cowborg comes out in 2025, or Cowborge. It's for the Morkborg system. Kobolds and Cowboys comes out this year for 5th edition D&D, and then Western Heroes. Don't even know if that one's out yet, but that's a supplement for the Everyday Heroes role-playing game. So all the way up until literally right now, tabletop role-playing games set in the American West or the Weird West or the Old West or the Wild West are a thing and have been since the mid-1970s. Well, and I said with no sign of slowing down. So there's a lot out there. If you want to play in the American West, whether it's in a supernatural campaign like Deadlands or just straight ahead Western stuff like Boot Hill or Aces and Eights, which didn't touch on any supernatural stuff, those games are out there for you. And I really hope you will take a look at some of them and maybe give them a try. I am actually going to be joining my colleagues and a bunch of fans for a Deadlands 30th anniversary. Good Lord, 30. Deadlands 30th anniversary celebration in Arizona, just outside of Phoenix, in October of this year. And I'll be running an adventure I wrote called The Last Ride of Hell's Inheritors. I'll be running that for attendees, and there'll also be a load of other games being run there by my fellow colleagues from Pinnacle and also by the general public. I will post a link down below if you have any interest in checking this event out. Maybe if you're local, you might be able to attend. It's a little pricey, but it's going to be great. We're going to have swag. There's going to be exclusive gaming and some other on-site and off-site events. So you can look into that if you're into Western gaming in general. So that's it. That is my promised episode about tabletop role-playing games, Western tabletop role-playing games that I promised you all at the very top of June on the Range. And with that, I'm officially slamming the saloon doors shut and climbing aboard my horse, my roan, and riding off into the sunset until next year. So thank you all for watching all of the stuff that I posted for June on the Range and all of the stuff that my co-hosts posted for June on the Range. A special thanks to Michael K. Vaughan for creating June on the Range to begin with. We all enjoy doing this. It really remains probably my favorite reading event on BookTube. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the other side, partners.